and welcome to Social Work Short Bitesize. I don't think we can ever talk about social work practice if we don't talk about power. And I want to try and relate this to communication in some way. So when we think about our interactions, we think about this power position, don't we? Where there are people, there is power. And Foucault would frame it in various ways: power to, power over, power with, and power from within. And Buber would talk about the I, thou, and I, it idea. Pulled this from Thompson's book, Theorising Social Work Practice, if you want to go and look up a bit more of that. We're recognising the position of the other person, disadvantaged possibly, maybe feeling somehow inadequate, somehow they've failed in some way. Depends why they've come to the attention of social work, I suppose. But probably feeling threatened, probably feeling challenged. Having a social worker on your doorstep maybe brings those feelings to the fore. And feelings that you may be intruding upon them. So this power to, these different ideas of power, this power to is power to bring about your wishes and goals. And that's maybe the sort of power that's not available to the people that we work with. Disempowered, frustrated. There's a great book called Scarcity, which I'll put in the show notes underneath, and talks about cognitive bandwidth and suggests that when people have very serious things going on in their lives, maybe they're living in poverty, maybe they have relationship difficulties, whatever it is that's going on, maybe they have a substance misuse issue or whatever, that uses up the bulk of the bandwidth they've got available to themselves to do whatever needs to be done in life. So once this bandwidth is eaten up, they've just got no room no capacity to think about change and transformation. So they continue to live in ways that they're living because they have no power to bring about their wishes and goals, because they haven't even got the time to think about it, the cognitive capacity to think about it, because so much of their cognitive bandwidth is being taken up by how am I going to feed myself tomorrow, how am I going to pay the rent, how am I going to do those kind of things if we relate it to poverty. And then there's power over people, this exercise of authority, legitimately sometimes, but can be oppressive if misused. So empowerment supports individuals to kind of break free from this power. And we need to contemplate whether the way we operate sometimes is from a power over position. Maybe not intentionally, but maybe unintentionally. And then a great aspect of power is power with, isn't it? It's about getting together collectively to overcome some sort of issue. And we've seen this in, service user-led movements, the changes we've seen in learning disabilities and care, and the changes we've seen, in disability awareness and those kind of things. That's power from coming together to collaborate, form groups. And I think partnership is an essential aspect, isn't it, of social work practice, working in partnership with people. If we look at, in children's work and adults' work, this concept of strengths-based approaches permeates through it all, where we're working we're not working as the expert, we're working with the person to find that power within, which is the next aspect of power within. And you may have experienced power within where you've got an inner strength to draw on when things aren't going so well, or when something needs to change. You draw on an inner strength. You're kind of plunged into crisis, but somehow you kind of manage to get through. You're challenged and you rise to the challenge. Aspects of strengths-based approaches in there as well. But one of the problems is, I would argue, is that often the people that we're trying to support and work with don't even know that they've got power within themselves often. and certainly even if they think they might have, may struggle to realize that power in some very kind of real way. So if we think about exercise of authority from this power over aspect, we can easily work as social workers from what Buber translates into an I-it experience for the service user, the family, the child. It's an instrumental relationship which has very little attention to respect and dignity, and very little attention to trying to create that power from within or power with. I think some of these things kind of stack on each other, don't they? Maybe we need to find power with first with people and then manifest their power from within. We're after an I-thou relationship, a relationship which is based on respect. It's me and it's you. I'm going to attend to you in an appropriate way, and I'm going to safeguard your dignity in this relationship. But it's easy, I think, and point the finger at myself here. From my practice, it's easy when up against it and very busy to default into that process position, isn't it, rather than that value position. So we end up with an instrumental relationship rather than an empowering one, and that's not criticism, it's just an observation, really. Matthew Gibson wrote an interesting article back in 2016, but still relevant. Social worker or social administrator? He asked that question, and this was about a qualitative case study from child protection social work teams, and he said this. It's pretty much a direct quote. The primary focus of the social workers interviewed had to be focused on the expectations of the agency rather than the service user. Such a focus shifts the function of direct practice from relationship building to a more transaction-based approach, with the practitioner interested in discrete transactions for the purpose of collecting information or ensuring that agreed obligations have been met as laid out in some procedure or plan. So he's describing there very much a move, isn't he, from values to a kind of almost a clinical approach, a process-led approach. And we have to consider the position of the other person. It's inevitable, I suppose, that we'll get some pushback because of our status, particularly if the person feels they're being processed. Particularly if we're trying to tell someone what to do. I don't know about you, but no one likes being told what to do. I don't like being told what to do. I like to make my own mind up about such things, about everything, and people should. And I suppose Matthew Gibson's alluding to the idea that process can sometimes dominate the relationship, and that, he would argue, breeds hostility. So I think we need to contemplate that, and we need to contemplate maybe how we communicate in a way that doesn't start to impose our agenda on something. And I came across this. This concept, this idea, and it's a way of trying to avoid getting into that hostility. And it's Rapoport's rules. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but you can look them up. Rapoport was a Russian-born American game theorist, a mathematician. How have we ended up talking about him in a social work thing? But he also contributed to general systems theory. And he contemplated, and people developed this idea, a list of rules for offering disagreement or criticism in conversations. So I think we can learn a little something from it in terms of, if we have a view of how things should be going, and maybe people aren't getting on board with that because they've established themselves in the trenches, haven't they? Because of all of those things we described earlier about how they're feeling. They're feeling threatened, they're feeling vulnerable. They're maybe not feeling particularly good about themselves, or they just want to tell you what you want to hear, so they get you out the door, So here's the rules, and it's really good. So I'll just read them and then I'll explain a little. He suggests, first of all, after you've listened, key skill, attempt to re-express the other person's position so clearly, vividly and fairly that they think, I wish I'd thought of describing it like that. Then list points of agreement. And then mention anything you've learned from the other person's dialogue. So not necessarily things you agree with, but things that you've learned. And then only then, once you've done those steps, are you permitted to say so much as one word of criticism or disagreement. Now, no one's saying, least of all me, that that's easy in particularly heated conversations. Which is why, as a starting point, it's crucial not to stoke the heat, I suppose. But if rule number 1 is right, and it's useful for somebody to hear their thoughts fed back to them in a way that synthesizes or consolidates or clarifies what it was they were saying, that's really useful. Why is that useful? Well, that's useful because they'll feel heard. And the one thing most people want in life is to be heard, is to have a voice and be heard, Then listing points of agreement next is really important, because what that does is it shows that despite the fact we might disagree on some things, there is some common ground here. We both have your son or daughter's best interests at heart. You might disagree about how to meet those, but you both, maybe that's a point of agreement, I don't know. I appreciate that's simplifying quite a complex issue. And then 3, mention anything that you've learned, and that shows mutual learning. It shows that you are in this together. The we word is very powerful. Here are the things that we've learned in that. Here are the things, what are we going to do about this situation? What are we going to do? What can we do to move things forward? Rather than what are you going to do? Or here's what I'm going to do. That's polarization, isn't it? So that's his rules. And only then are you permitted to say something, to say your own thing. So your thing comes last. What you need to say comes last. After you've clearly articulated what you've heard, clearly articulated what you agree with, or what you're in agreement over, clearly articulated what you've learned, then you get to say, this is what I think, and only then. And when you're doing that, it's really interesting. This is a really interesting point. Finish with this. And it's a really interesting point. Avoid facts. What do I mean by that? The idea is based on one of the most difficult things for people who form their beliefs and their understanding of the world based on evidence, based on facts. And here's the problem. Not everyone forms their beliefs based on facts. People use base their understanding on all manner of things. Facebook, Twitter, Daily Mail, etc. And some of these things appear illogical to us. And we think, well, you could have based that on something better, maybe. Who are we to say? The point with that is that what that means is often facts don't persuade. And an appeal to the heart is often a better starting point than an appeal to the head. I often refer to social work practice as being emotional labour. You are working with the emotions of other people. You are working with your emotions in that situation. And you are working at the intersection of those emotions, that emotional content in the conversation. So presenting facts will almost never do what you think it'll do. It won't change the person's mind. But an appeal to the heart, if you can find what that is really important. Questions invite answers. Statements encourage argument. Take care. If you like what I do here, there are some links below. It'd be really good if you give me a follow. If you subscribed to the YouTube channel, that'd be a big thing for me if you could do that. Or come along to my Patreon account and have a look at what's going on there, particularly around self-care and that kind of thing there. Okay, it's been lovely to talk to you. Take care. Have good weeks.